Okay, so hey everyone, and welcome to this edition of Cerini Connection. I'm Ken Cerini, Managing Partner of Cerini Associates. I'm thrilled to have all of you guys with us. Just a couple of administrative things before we get started. If you have questions, please just throw them in the chat. I will try to work through and incorporate as many of the questions as I possibly can. I'm not monitoring anything other than the chat, so please, if you have questions, just jump them into the chat. I want to make this as interactive as possible. So as we're going through, if anybody has any comments or anything they want to share, again, please throw that into the chat. The more we can kind of learn both from Eric and from each other, that would be great. Today, we are having a conversation about generational shifts in the workforce. I think all of us are experiencing that. It's something that's super important to us and to a lot of our clients. So I think that's important. And we're kind of be looking into the dynamics of a multi-generational workplace and how it shapes business culture, expectations, future of work. Joining me today is Eric Miller, who's the founder of North Star. Eric, first of all, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And again, we're hoping to cover some topics such as what Gen Z is bringing to the workforce, understanding the unique traits of different generations. We're going to look at some strategies on how to attract and retain staff. Communication, we were talking about it before we opened up. Communication is probably the most important aspect of all of this, and how do we keep those lines of communication open, and whatever else you guys want to talk about. So that's what we're doing. So Eric, let's start off by, can you give us maybe an overview of the different generations in today's workforce and how their expectations, their values, and maybe their work styles differ?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for having me, and hello to everybody on the webinar. I'm really excited to be here. So there are right now four generations in the workforce, right? We have a baby boomer generation that makes up around 15% of the workforce right now.
Good to know I'm the minority.
What? Yep. We have Generation X, which is 31%. They're, starting to now dwindle a little bit more. We have the Millennials, that's 36%. They've actually, over the last couple of years, overtaken the majority of the workforce. And then we have the wonderful Generation Z, which we're going to get into a lot during this webinar right now, which is about 18%, give or take a little bit right there. And each of them, and this is what's making, I think, some companies start to just have different challenges in terms of engagement and retention of these employees. They are so very different. They're so very different from one another. And the key of during this webinar today is to figure out how we can all kind of come together and unlock each other's superpower. It's the only little corporate jargon I'll issue during this webinar, superpowers. But each of them has a very different philosophy, right? If you go to the baby boomer type generation, your job is your commitment. It's sort of almost like your identity into the workforce, right? Generation X, job is a means to an end. Job is a way to fund things after it, in your personal lives. Millennials, now we're starting to get a little bit more towards purpose. A job is part of who I am, but not everything. And I also need to see a lot of value and fulfillment with what I do. It's not necessarily just a thing. And then you have Generation Z. They are prioritizing a job as something that needs to matter. They see the value of time. Time is the biggest commodity that anybody ever has. It's the biggest, most important thing. And what they see is if they're investing 8 hours a day in a company, it darn well better align with their values and kind of their belief systems. And they need to be able to see that within each company. So it's a little flavoring of all four.
Yeah, it used to be that someone got a job with a company and they stayed with the company forever. It seems like in the Gen Z world, and even some of the millennials and stuff, they bounce around a little bit more. And I've heard that people no longer follow or value necessarily the company. It's the leadership within the company that kind of plays that important role. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, leaders now better embody not only the values of the company itself, but they need to really broadcast that out. They are not just a leader that is, sitting up in some type of ivory tower and just delegating down. That type of leadership is gone. You often hear the term servant leadership, really leading from within, making sure that you are supporting your employees. What I've seen over the last 15, 20 years especially, is those are the leaders that are going to attract people, right? They are a billboard in essence of the organization that they're representing. And they're going to be the ones too that are more inclined to start up, generate programs that are going to embody that, right? So if they have kind of a very inclusive leadership style, one that is reflective of not necessarily just the work that the company's doing, right, but also the work of what the company's doing around them, like ancillary type work, mission, and vision value work, right? Look at Cerini, right? Cerini accounting and services like that. But now you also have a lot of arms and relationships with nonprofits, right? It's stuff like that individuals are now being looking at when they're looking at a job. It's not necessarily what product you deliver or what service you deliver. It's what around that. It also makes up kind of the DNA and the fabric of the company.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about before we kind of got started is that a lot of today's leadership, a lot of the upper level leadership, a little bit older, maybe they learned their leadership style from baby boomers or the silent generation, the generations before them. What do current leaders need to do to kind of retool themselves to put themselves in a position where they are able to be that type of leader that the Gen Z needs them to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll kind of answer it a little bit with what you were saying before, Ken, which is, we have individuals now, depending on what publication you subscribe to or whatnot, let's just say directionally, individuals are staying in role or in company for about 19 months. 19 months.
Is that what the standard is now, about 19 months?
Around 19 months to 24, right? So it's right in that pocket, whether it's in role within a company, so meaning you're moving around roles, or just saying goodbye to the organization and moving someplace else. That's around what it is right now, which is, depending on how you look at it, that's both sobering and also kind of exciting. If we have leaders that are now recognizing that there's an opportunity to retain people, but retain people differently by by promoting within, that starts to become slightly, attractive, both from hey, I could have a really interesting career moving around within an organization if that's something that now the leadership values, versus kind of like you're in a role and you're going to get promoted, let's just say every 5 years, 7 years or something like that, and you're going to be in it for life. You teed up the question. That's not really working anymore. That's the constructs that were kind of put in place by a baby boomer generation who now makes up 15% of the workforce. If you start retooling it to say this is the opportunity that we have for individuals within our organization, that now becomes an attraction little highlight there. And then of course you feel good about your career when you're there. These are the things that we need to start really be thinking about from a leadership perspective and organization perspective, and it just keeps on stacking on one another. But 19 to 24 months, which is
it is sobering.
wild.
You talked about before, or I guess somebody brought up, might have been me, brought up communication.
Oh,
And the importance and significance of communication. And how does communication play into the ability maybe to hold people longer? And what sort of communication is important in terms of attracting and retaining staff?
yeah. So this one, I mean, this we can spend the entire rest of the webinar on, but I'll try to keep I will not meander down a whole bunch of different rabbit holes. So
I'll probably take you there anyway. So
that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Apologies in advance to the 58 lovely people that are on the call. So one of the biggest things that came out of the pandemic and I saw it with my own kids, is we went from a very co-located model in schools, in the workforce, to a dispersed one. And one of the most interesting things that came out of that is, and I'll hold up my little phone here, this was always designed to be somewhat of an asynchronous type communication device, right? You'll text somebody and then you're not waiting to see if the little dots are appearing where they're going to be texting you right back. You text somebody and they get back to you when they can, right? And that was how it was. And then during the pandemic, when everybody was pretty isolated, right? Gen Z, again, I saw it with my kids, my nephews, and everything. They experienced such kind of tension. There's anxiety going through that, right? So they started turning these devices into real time. I'm going to text you, we're going to hear back. I'm going to text you, we're going to hear back. And it's a wonderful thing in the sense that it created a community, a virtual community, and it kind of reconnected people real time using now technology. But now what's happened is they've taken that into the workforce. So, a classic example is especially with Gen Z is I'm Gen X, right? I traditionally always is using email, right? Email, I'll email somebody, and then my expectation is they'll email me back, at a certain point, depending on the priority of the email and the urgency and all that stuff. That was always my expectation. I think that's sort of fairly pervasive out there, right? I can't tell you how many organizations, little, smaller companies that I've been working with over the last, I'll say 18 months, where that's just not working. And they need to figure out, things like a Slack or a Teams, messaging type device to keep people into that fluid type communication that they're used to, right? They're used to texting. And I mean, I've even seen organizations that they have, just text chats, apps that they're using to support that. But it's really, really important. The other thing too, before I just pause for a minute is, and this is I love about Gen Z is if you're having meetings, like if you're having a meeting, make sure there's a purpose for the meeting. I was observing a company a couple months back, and they were meeting about some topic. It doesn't really matter what, but after it, like kind of as it was closing, this individual new to the workforce, maybe 2 years in, she goes like this, and now what? What do we do now? And everybody kind of like looked around, and it was like there was no outcome, there was no purpose of the meeting, right? There was just kind of like it was a meeting to be there. And this is I'm those who know me, I'm not a big fan of that. I'm a fan of 30-minute meetings, and you better either be addressing a problem that you all have or something that you all need to agree on. If you're ever saying like we need to have this as a takeaway, or we need to table this, or we need to table this, you never should have had the meeting. And Gen Z is more inclined to call that out. And that's another whole big vehicle because they just getting back to the time thing, they value time. And if they're seeing that and it's 30 minutes that they could have been doing something else that's more beneficial to them, to the organization, doesn't fly well with them. So I know I said a lot. I kind of tried to hold.
Okay. And I mean, you talked a little bit about, communication and tools, Teams, things, Slack, all those types of things. I mean, I think what you're finding is more and more people find themselves, continuing to be somewhat isolated in some of those remote work environments or kind of working in a hybrid work environment. I think those types of tools help to kind of keep that feeling of togetherness or feeling of connection with the rest of the people that they work with. And, we are still social beings at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Ken, I'd love to, hear your thoughts on it, but like it's really interesting to see like how individuals are either coming back or questioning back, right? Like, so to me, I've seen it's like 50-50, right? People love the camaraderie and the back and forth in the office. And then you have the others that are, hybrid and are kind of like digging in on remote work because what they see in some of their organizations, and I definitely see this with bigger organizations for sure, is people come into the building, they go into their cubicle or they go into their workspace or their office, they close the door, and then they hop on a Zoom like this. And I'm like, well, what the heck is the purpose of that? Like, if you're going to the office, like I want to be actually communicating face to face, not like closing a door. So we got to really, figure out the work identity relevant to those types of situations, and figure out what works for everybody, and don't try to shoehorn people in to one common model, which is very easier said than executed on.
Right. So then how do we create an appropriate, successful, whatever word you want to use, work environment for the different generations if they all have different thought processes? What is the common thread? What is the special sauce that we have to use in order to kind of keep this working?
Yeah. So it's a great question. It's one of the biggest ones that I'm asked a lot, and I always give the answer that everybody hates, which is it depends. But now hear me out. Go with me on this for a second. I think smaller organizations, definitely in the startup genre, I don't think like remote work really works. I just don't. They're moving at a very rapid pace. They're evolving at a very rapid pace. And I'm talking like startup and very, very small organizations. I think there is something to be said about in-person or a very structured hybrid environment. People are not just wearing one specific role hat. It is going across and creating a more dynamic and fluid role that a person's coming into. So they're not just a CFO. They're talking about, yes, I'd say 25 or less in the chat, Alex. They need to be having like a fluid type of work model in the sense of like the roles and hats that they need to wear. Then you have, what I'll call like middle of the road, starting to get a little bit bigger. And that applies to all generations, by the way, what I was talking about for like small businesses. I think people need to see the value in that. And quite frankly, just the diversity of thought that's going to come across to those in the room when you have multi-generational individuals in a single room. I think there's a lot of back and forth that you're going to lose over Zoom, right, wrong, whatever. I'd love to have, follow-up conversations with anybody that would, want to on this topic, but I do think you lose something real time there. Organizations that are, I would say, definitely north of 100, you need to have some type of structured environment. You're seeing a lot of backlash right now because we're a very extremist society, right? Like we were all in office prior to pandemic, or maybe we had like, work remote on Fridays or something like that. And then post-pandemic, it was like, okay, or during pandemic and post, everybody was remote. And now we're seeing people clawing back individuals, right? You saw it with Meta, you see it with Chase and all that. And there's a big questioning by everybody because they're like, well, we've been doing this for a good solid 2 years. We've had success with it. And that's across all generations. Why, what's the incentive for us to come back there? And I'll tell you, the incentive there for a hybrid work environment is the exact same thing that fuels what I was just talking about before with the startup environments. There is something to be said if you get into a room together or get, work driven together in that diversity of thought mindset. Now, what I will say and what I do challenge the bigger organizations on is when you're coming up with a hybrid work environment, don't just say Tuesdays and Wednesdays are going to be the days that we come in. Make it project driven, make it deliverable driven, make it where people have a vested interest to come in and hear about how all of your contributions are going to move something forward. Don't make it like, a specific day at all. Like it.
I'm gonna comment if you don't mind, and I
Yeah,
don't know if
please.
I'm gonna disagree or not disagree or just agree differently
No,
on
absolutely.
one piece of this. But you said, smaller organization stuff, but I also think, when you're talking about any size organization that's in a major growth mode, if you're onboarding a lot of people, I think having more of that in person until people get to know each other, get to understand each other, I think is super helpful because I think it allows people to learn not just in a one-on-one like this,
Sure.
Also overhearing conversations, being involved in the communication and the flow that's happening in the office and everything else. And it helps to build the bonds and all this other stuff.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And remember, I kind of like had that thing. It depends. That is definitely one of the things that it would depend on, right? If you're in growth mode, right? If you need to, if you're going through any type of transition also within the company, whether it's the identity or you're broadening out into other areas, any one of those situations to me is a trigger to have a balance and somewhat of a structured balance, because otherwise you're going to lose exactly what you just said, Ken. You're going to lose some of that identity, some of that continuity, some of that kind of camaraderie and relationship building that you absolutely need in those situations. So we agree.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's go back to Gen Z a second. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about how and you talked a little bit about how Gen Z thought process is different, but how do you see Gen Z impacting the workforce? And Gen Z being 18% of the workforce now, as you said, about are we looking at a kind of a tail wagging the dog sort of situation here, or what are we seeing?
So I think what's happening right now, um, and I was going back and forth where I was going to use this, but I've been using it more and more. So I call it the Columbo generation, Columbo TV show from back in the 70s. I'll catch everybody up. I'm just going to make the assumption
Or
nobody.
you can, if you want to use now, you can call it Lizbeth.
Right, Elizabeth, right? Yes. Same thing. So whichever one you're using, but what I'm seeing with this generation more than any other is they are questioning processes that have just been baked for way too long that need to just be blown up. Gen Z is blowing up the workforce in a very good way. We're getting rid of things that just don't need to be there. Classic example of what I was just saying earlier, right? Like having somebody come up and say like, well, what do we do next after this meeting? And then I hear somebody grumbling, why did they say that? They always, typical Gen Z, like, they want what they want. And I'm like, well, let's time out for a second. Let's have a conversation right now. So this is one of the individuals that brought me in to do some evaluation work. I said, let's have a conversation. I said, why do you feel that way? Like this individual is literally challenging something that probably needs to be challenged, right? So why are you having this meeting? It's our status meeting. I said, well, I heard a lot of kind of like pseudo status, but if I look down on my paper, it was one of the couple of things that I said I can't stand. I see so many like table this, table this, table this, follow up, follow up, follow up. So now you have like 10 additional meetings. Like, what is the purpose? Do we really need something like this? And I'll tell you this, and this isn't in every case, Ken, but like within 3 months, that meeting was gone. And I attribute that to this individual, the Colombo generation. Like, how, just 1 second, like, why are we doing this, right? So it's like, you think you're doing a lot of good, but then it's like, well, but why? Like, why do we need this? How is this advancing anything? And that's one example. Then, you get into other things where, they'll say, they'll start sparking ideas in terms of like how you're engaging with the community around you. Why are you're a Long Island based organization, and I get that most of your bread and butter is in Manhattan, but what are you doing to make the community aware of what it is that you're doing and why they should be aware of you? Simple things like this, which we've just all kind of taken our eyes off the ball a little bit. Gen Z is like, what is going on here? And being loud about it. They're being, sometimes people, this is another thing, and this goes back to the communication stuff, Ken. Uh, Gen Z will come in, do a great job, and then exit out. Exit out from the day and not stay past 5 o'clock. And you'll have people, they're slackers and stuff like that. Same thing Gen X heard, slackers and all that stuff. They're slackers, and what's going on, and why do they need to be here? Well, because they wrapped up the work, they wrapped up what their commitment was. And did you bother telling them anything else about like, okay, well, here's some other things that you could be doing, or here's what we could do in downtime, or maybe that just makes sense. And that was what I always needed to set the expectation. So they're starting to really press on and reformat a little bit about what it means to come into an office, or whether it comes, what it means to come into a workforce scenario, and start to really push on that and challenge that. And let me tell you, as all these multiple generations are in the workforce, if we don't start embracing a little bit about that, we're not going to necessarily feel the pain right now. We will, but not as much as in a couple of years, when all of a sudden we have a management gap, because now we have a whole bunch of people that are not invested in an organization, and now they're no longer there. And so now you have this Gen X, which is exiting. You have a baby boomer population, which is exiting. Millennials are up there. And now you don't have a constant feeding going into the organization. So they're pushing on all of that, and bless them every day.
So are you, couple things here. So are you saying that things are more task oriented than time oriented in the Gen Z world, where it's like, I have these things to do and I'm going to do them to the best of my ability and get through the projects and stuff, and then, as you said, they value their time, and then their time is their time, and as opposed to, hey, you got to stick around for the sake of sticking around.
Correct. They don't see it like that at all. And honestly, like I can't necessarily fault them or blame them on that, right? Like if we know that we need to have, and I'll call this a life work balance, not a work life balance, a life work balance. If we know that behind, every single person has needs on their own time, they're bringing that into the workforce. They're bringing that into their hourly setup. So it's exactly that, Ken. It's if I've gotten all of my stuff done, and this is how the role has been defined to me by my manager or by the leadership, then I'm good. And so then that sparks a whole other conversation, which is like, that's amazing, but now, like, what else could we be doing? Or are we okay with that?
I like what you said there, because it leads into the next thought I was going to bring up anyway. You said that's how their role has been defined.
Yeah.
So when we sit here now, it just means that we have to redefine roles in terms of, and that's exactly from what my observation of working with, as I mentioned to you before we got started, our average age here is probably in the high 20s. So I'm dealing with a lot of Gen Zs.
Love it.
There's a lot of need for feedback. There's a lot of need for understanding of the growth within the organization. There's a lot of need for understanding of roles within the organization and what the expectations are, so that they really have a true, not just flat two-dimensional job description, but it's something kind of more robust than, look, here's a bunch of words on a page, but like, here's the expectations, here's what you need to do in order to move up within the organization. And then they're going to hold your feet to the fire in terms of making sure that if they're doing those things and you're not doing what you said you were going to do, why, and I'm gone.
Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there.
Sorry.
No, it's a good one, Ken. Ken, this is good. I love what you threw at me there, because it's actually two things that are near and dear to my heart. One is really skills-based signaling to people out there in terms of job descriptions and in terms of the work remit. But also another thing, and I'm going to actually lead with this first, which is, goal setting and performance management. And this speaks across all generations. I will encourage people out there, let us blow up the annual dreaded performance evaluation, right, for companies that are doing that, which is the majority of them that I see out there. And let us please get into what I will call frequent feedback loops and check-ins. And let's make that organic, and let's make that about skills and what we need to really promote an individual from within and support their skill growth and development, and make sure that they're feeling that they're doing a job both well as recognized, as well as, honing their skills. Let's make sure that what came in on that job description it's going to change. We know it's going to change when a person gets into that seat. It's going to evolve and change, and that's okay. That's kind of the expectation. But let's make sure that those conversations are happening. So when you come in, I work with individuals on like a 30, 60, 90-day plan, right? You come into the organization, right? And these are going to be the expectations of 30 days. And that's probably just building relationships, to your point earlier, Ken, right? Like kind of having that co-location or that, that high touch situation in the beginning. But now 60 is like, how can I start being a contributor to the organization? How can I start advancing? That plays to everybody. Everybody wants to feel that they are doing something of value to the organization, that they're advancing both themselves and the company. That's why they wanted to go there. And then 90, now to me, you're starting to get into a cadence, but having that frequent feedback, one, it allows people to just be a little bit more nimble, a little bit more keyed into the organization. But it also, if you do have to do like a performance metric at the end of the year, there's no surprises there anymore. That almost becomes a check the box exercise in a very good way now versus a very dreaded way before, right? If, you're following. So like having that constant loop of information just benefits everyone. So like that is very, very near and dear to me. It kind of underscores all the stuff we were talking about earlier in terms of like just communication and making sure people understand where they are. And that's a good thing. That's a good bedrock. But
Yeah,
now,
I was going to say, we try to use our reviews for goals and growth.
yeah, I love it. I love it. And how good is that? And then, people need to see that as a couple of wins, right, for them, right? They know exactly where they stand. They know how they're going to grow. And oh, by the way, and sometimes when people hear this coming out of my mouth, they get a little nervous or put off. I said, it's also a resume item. It's also a resume item. You should be, to a degree, always looking out for yourself and your resume. It doesn't mean you're leaving anywhere. It doesn't mean you're going anywhere, but it's your own personal development. And again, for those who know me, I always say you have two jobs. You have the job that you're going to every day. That's the job of financial transaction and all that stuff. And then there's your personal development and growth. And you have to have both of those going at any given time, regardless of if you're looking for a new job or not, because it benefits everybody involved. I'll pause there. If you want, I can go over to the attraction issue, which is just skills based and
Right.
really trying to go there. Um, I would say, companies that could, contemplate and maybe get out of their own way about broadening out their talent pool strategy, broadening out where they're looking for individuals and considering non-traditional backgrounds, as well as signaling to people that this is about skills and less about, your title, right? So let me give you an example. If I see somebody, on a job description, must have director experience for the last 3 years, like that can mean, and I've seen it, that can mean a lot of things. Is it people management experience? Is it project-based experience? Is it individual contributor that you're just a subject matter expert on something? Like, what is it? Get rid of the director. Get titles don't follow us. Skills do, experiences do on what we do from a career standpoint, right? Titles don't. They may, I mean, by chance, but they don't necessarily follow us. We got to get rid of all that. Got to get rid of all that. I'd also encourage organizations to really reevaluate education requirements. That's a good thing. That shows additional learning, but is it really going to be a requirement versus an individual who understands Excel or an individual who understands analytics or bookkeeping or what have you, right? Like get to what you need this person to do in order to enter into the job, and then worry about developing them as you're going through building up their career and supporting them once they're landed.
It's not my daughter bitches about this all the time, and she's left companies because they, from a title perspective or from a work perspective, it's okay, you put me in a role and then you're not letting me do my job, or you're putting me in a role and you're not telling me what I'm supposed to be doing or what latitude and stuff I have. And I will grow to do whatever you need me to do, but I need to understand what that is and what my expectations are. And if you're not giving me that, how can I do my job effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel her pain and frustration. Like I unfortunately see that a lot. And those are some conversations that some organizations, some leaders, we were talking about it earlier, right? People are following and adopting more into leaders than organizations these days. They need to be prepared to start facing those realities and start correcting them, or it's going to be an eventual bad place that they find themselves in from a talent perspective. And we all know talent is what fuels an organization, right? It period, full stop.
You know that there's multi-generations here, and I apologize that I keep coming back to Gen X. But from a Gen X perspective, um, what is it that motivates Gen X? What is it? What are the perks? What are the benefits? Someone had put in a question in here, what's my reward from a Gen Z perspective? I'm sorry, I said X, I meant Z. From a
I was
Gen
all
Z
getting ready to key up the whole Gen X stuff because I could tell you.
Sorry, from a Gen Z perspective, what is it that we need to be doing from a benefits, perks, what's my reward sort of perspective?
Yeah. One of the things I was working with an individual on, we were kind of just brainstorming, working with a small little company out west, and they were talking about, there's a lot of companies out there now that are adopting into work within the environment. That's a priority. It should be a priority to everybody. It is definitely a massive priority for Gen Z and what they're currently seeing and experiencing real time, right? I think we need to consider society. This sounds very maybe colorful, too colorful for some people, but we need to be a little bit more keyed in on our communities that we are in, and figuring out what should be the additional purposes that this company can achieve because of their namesake, or because of the individuals that they can supply jobs to in the community. What can they do to support economic growth and all that stuff? That's great. That is absolutely great. But what can you do from a volunteering perspective to further support communities, to further to support, maybe underserved communities? What could we do there to support society at large, as well as our environment at large? These are big things, right? So, putting in a basketball hoop in the break room, and then, calling that culture when you don't even know if everybody likes playing basketball, that's a misstep. And that's definitely a way to, almost, make individuals question engagement of that organization, and question kind of like, what is that organization really trying to do, right? Are they really trying to get to know them? Well, do you like playing basketball? I don't. I'm 6'4". I suck at basketball, right? But
Me too.
right? But like I see that. I'm not going to be like, oh man, they have free chips and free sodas and all that stuff. I don't even like, well, I like Coke, but like outside of that, not really soda. But like they've not gotten to know me, versus like, what is it that's really, really driving you? And that was the conversation that I was having with this individual. It's like, what is really driving things? So one is get to know your employees. Believe it or not, that starts to unlock what benefits and whatnot you can actually, choose to realize. And it's not just your traditional medical, dental, vision. I mean, that's certainly good. 401k, certainly good. Not knocking any of that stuff. But we need to get more creative with what we can do as an organization. If your organization is creating economic growth for around the community, that's great. Do something with that. Do something with that. Do something more. That is a value and mission-driven avenue to explore. And I encourage everybody on the call, especially if you're in an HR leadership position, organizational leadership position, please take a look at that, please, because we have the ability to do, I think, more than what we're doing.
Well, couple comments that leads into. I pretty much start every single interview I do with a potential candidate by telling them I hate interviews. and that we're
Yeah,
not going to be doing an interview and we're going to have a conversation. And the
love it.
purpose of this conversation is so that they get a better understanding of who we are, we get a better understanding of who they are, and we can make a joint decision as to whether this is an appropriate match for both of us.
Absolutely. I love it. I love
And
it.
I think, too often, we fall back into that archaic interview process where I have something you want, which is not the truth. The truth is both sides are making a determination whether they're going to invest their time in us and we're going to invest our resources and growth in them. So
Absolutely.
you talked about social responsibility and making a social difference and everything else. How important is it for organizations to, as part of their recruiting process, as part of their recruiting area of their website, talk about some of the social impact that they're
Absolutely.
having?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a must.
Mm.
Uh, but I just, it has to be a must that is genuine, right? It's putting out information that is absolutely happening because there is a thought process around it that this is what we really need to do and not a check the box item because it will come across very, very clearly that is a check the box item if you list it, like in a way that it's like, oh, all of a sudden, we're doing we're I don't know, we're planting trees. And then the next year we're, gonna go to a soup kitchen and all that stuff. Like that's good, but like show continuity. Maybe in say, hey, I want to invest in working with this nonprofit, and don't just make it a 1 day thing. Like that comes across to me as like great, thank you for rallying your company around a 1 day day of social giving, but like make it a part of the company. Don't just do it like 1 day or 1 week. Like again, just you got to weave it into the fabric, into that value proposition of saying like we have the ability to do something. Let's do it and let's do it consistently.
It,
That's a
it,
great message to have on a website, Ken.
it's all about adding purpose to your mission.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you're in a position where you can give back, whether it's time or whether it's money or whether it's you whatever, do that consistently.
We're running out of time, so I'm going to just throw one more question at you, and I really just, what do we need to do from a culture perspective to build culture to attract and retain talent? I mean, that's I think one of the biggest issues people have, is you get people in, they stay for, as you said, 18 to 20 months, then they're gone. But what do I need to do from a culture perspective to kind of change that and alter that trend?
It's the simplest thing. Simplest thing. Talk with one another, listen with one another, and give people the kindness and the empathy to actually have those conversations and to whether you want to call it being vulnerable or what have you, but having that open dialogue. So that way, when a person says what we were talking about earlier, Ken, why did we even have that meeting? We don't have five other people being like, oh my goodness, like they might as well have just said something like hugely inappropriate. Like it was just like we need to be in a position to have those conversations, or you're going to have cultural erosion. So yeah, I mean, I like to say, talk with, vocalize, listen, and create that space where you can have that type of, great interaction without people being tense.
All right, so we're kind of basically out of time, but Eric, this was so valuable, and I want to thank
Yeah.
you for being part of this. Before we wrap up, do you want to like maybe give one or two key takeaways that people should kind of think about in terms of this webinar?
Yeah. I'm just going to repeat exactly what I just said because I think that just that almost kind of like it just goes out there, right? Like talk with one another, like communicate, like get to know one another, and just please be kind. Like I feel like certain companies have lost that a little bit. Whether it's and I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just the way we're working now. It's a little bit different. We need to kind of get back to grassroots of just being good to one another, and that doesn't mean you're weak or anything like that or you're less. It's just being good people. So we could just be like that, please.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Eric, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Be sure to tune in next month on May 22nd for our next Cerini Connection, where we'll be discussing prioritizing mental health in the workplace, strategies for supportive culture. I'll be speaking with Tildette Varin, an organizational and leadership development consultant and inner mastery specialist and certified stress mastery educator. A lot of things to say there. We'll talk about how mental health is impacting productivity, engagement, retention, and how companies can build a more supportive and resilient workplace. Until then, we'll see you. Take care, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.